So thank you very much for joining me. I've got about half an hour's worth of material prepared, but I thought it would be nicer if I did about 10 minutes and then took some questions, and then I did another 10 minutes and then took some questions, etc. Because it's not very nice sitting listening to a lot of stuff and not having an opportunity to ask questions as they come up. So that's my aim, is to break it up and then give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have. So welcome to the first webinar on AI readiness, an introduction for everybody. And this is indeed extremely introductory. The idea is to give you a taste of what AI readiness means, and then there'll be follow-up webinars so that you can find out more if you're interested. So is AI readiness about deciding what kind of AI to buy, or what kind of AI to design or build if you're a tech developer? Absolutely not. It's about how you get yourself ready to make those decisions. Because before you know what AI will best meet your needs, you need to get your organization AI ready and learn how to see your organization through an AI lens. And that includes understanding that AI is about intelligence, and that the best AI is the AI that works alongside human intelligence. So who are we? The team behind the AI Readiness Program? Well, there's myself, and there's my colleagues, Carmel, Ali, Mutlu, Anissa, and Ben. And we all have a background working in education, entrepreneurship, and artificial intelligence primarily, along with data science. And who are you? Well, I hope that you're a mix of people. Maybe you're an educator, maybe you're an educational leader, maybe you're a tech developer, maybe you're just curious, maybe you just want to find some help to understand how you can better understand AI and get yourself prepared for the AI that is coming our way in education. Without question, much of it is already here. So why are we here? What is the purpose of starting to learn about AI readiness and starting to get yourself ready? Well, we're in a really interesting point in time. I often refer to this as being a perfect storm. There's masses of data being collected all of the time, and then we have very sophisticated algorithms, both using machine learning techniques and indeed some of the more traditional AI techniques, plus masses and masses of computing power and memory that can process that data using those algorithms. When I was a mere student, an undergraduate studying AI, we had nothing like the kind of power and memory that's available today. I have more power and memory on my phone than I had in the first computer that I used to try and write AI programs. But a lot of people ask the very basic question, completely understandably, so what is AI? And it's a very difficult definition to provide because there are many, many, many different definitions depending upon the perspective that you're taking as you're looking at AI. But I think the kind of definition you find in the Oxford English Dictionary is fine as a starting point for thinking about the basics of AI. So AI are the tools, the techniques that allow computing technology to behave in ways that we would think of as being intelligent if the behaviors were being performed by a human. We think of them as essentially human. But that leads us to an even deeper question, and that is, what is intelligence? We talk about artificial intelligence, and I'll talk quite a bit about human intelligence, but what is intelligence? And I would also ask, do we need to reconceptualize how we think about intelligence now that we've built artificially intelligent machines? Well, is it the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills? Maybe it's a quickness of mental comprehension or mental agility. Maybe it's knowledge or wisdom, or perhaps it's even the ability to speak and write in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. That last one is what you needed to be able to do if you were to enter Harvard when it first opened. And times have changed. But how can you recognize intelligence? And that's a really important question when we're thinking about artificial intelligence. How can we recognize that a computing system is intelligent? And here are some very early thoughts and some more recent thoughts about how you can recognize intelligence. The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. so we believe Einstein has said. I know that I am intelligent because I know that I am nothing, or because I know nothing. I'm certainly not nothing. I know nothing. So we believe Socrates has said. I'm intelligent because I can handle criticism without denial, blame, excuses, or anxiety, which is a way of talking about emotional intelligence. And when you start thinking about intelligence that way, maybe it's not so easy to think about computing technology as intelligent in this way. Intelligence is having an IQ test over 100. Maybe, or maybe the IQ test is a way of testing how good we are at IQ tests. Intelligence is being a grandmaster at the game of Go. Certainly that's the way we might think about AI systems like AlphaGo demonstrating their intelligence. But actually, perhaps the more important question is, how are artificial and human intelligence different? And one of the key ways that human and artificial intelligence are different can be found in the way that as humans, we can reflect upon our own thinking. We can reflect upon our own feeling. We can reflect upon our own experiences, and we are conscious of those experiences. And indeed, philosophers like Yuval Noah Harari have said in his book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, that one of the key things we need to do is understand ourselves before the AI understands us better than we do. So the power to understand ourselves is really important. And actually, it's something that AI finds really difficult to do. And AI is very much more about producing things, processing, without necessarily knowing what that processing is all about. So perhaps to think about artificial and human intelligence in a more specific way, I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Machine Learning and Artificial Intelligence, in which I talked a lot about human intelligence, in fact, and tried to draw out some of the differences between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I suggested that it would be useful to think about human intelligence slightly differently because we are now in an artificially intelligent world. And so I set about trying to find ways of thinking about human intelligence that would help us make those distinctions. And I would suggest that human intelligence is a very complex set of interactions between different sorts of elements that are all interwoven together. I'm not suggesting these are separate intelligences. They're just different elements of that same complex whole, human intelligence. So we have interdisciplinary academic intelligence, which is much of what happens in school at the moment. There are many other things that happen too, but the way that we assess and evaluate is very much steeped in this notion of academic intelligence. And I would suggest that increasingly it needs to be interdisciplinary, because there are very few problems, the complex problems that we face today, think about the current pandemic, that can be solved by one discipline alone. We rely on disciplines working together. In the current situation, we have economists, we have clinicians, we have medical researchers, we have epidemiologists, I don't think I could say that word, scientists of different types, sociologists, many different sorts of expertise coming together to think about how we tackle this pandemic. And we have our social intelligence. It's what we're very good at as humans, socializing, interacting, working with each other. And then we have a set of what I call meta-intelligences, which are all about this being able to reflect upon ourselves. And the first one of these I refer to as meta-knowing intelligence. Some people might call it epistemic cognition or personal epistemology. It's about our understanding about where knowledge comes from. How do we know that we should believe something we're being told to be true? Where do we get our knowledge and understanding from? These are really important questions, and that's part of us understanding why we should know something. And then there's metacognitive intelligence, which is very much about our ability to reflect on our own thinking, to make decisions about whether we do know something or we don't know something, but also to be able to recognize when our attention is being drawn away, and to have the kind of regulation and control that means that we can bring that attention back to what we're learning about. Then metasubjective intelligence, which is more than just emotional intelligence. It's about us understanding how we are or are not developing that emotional intelligence. And it's about understanding how the people we're working with are or are not developing that metasubjective, that emotional intelligence and that understanding of their emotional intelligence. Metacontextual intelligence, something that we take for granted all the time. This is about the ability to move seamlessly between environments, between situations, between interacting with different people, between learning different things, between using different resources. We move about the world very easily in the main, and we don't really realize how much intelligence that takes to achieve. And we can behave differently according to those different contexts. And even when we come to an environment or context that we've not experienced before, we can usually work out a way to interact in that environment. And then if we get all of these elements together, we get to the stage where we have accurate perceived self-efficacy. We understand ourselves, we know what we know how we can learn something new, who we need to ask for help, how we need to ask for help. We know how the different pieces of information, the different knowledge that we've built can be pieced together to cross those disciplinary boundaries. And if we look at this, it's hard to see how AI can really do much of that meta intelligence. I think it can maybe move a little bit on the meta knowing intelligence, and it can perhaps do a little bit to help the social intelligence, but it's not really socially intelligent. Interdisciplinary academic intelligence, yes, I believe that is something that's accessible to AI. But as you can see, there's a lot about our human intelligence that isn't, which is why it's really important that we think about how AI and human intelligence work best together. And I'm going to stop there and stop sharing my screen just for a moment to ask if there are any questions that people might like to ask at the moment. And I'm sure that I can find those questions on my screen.
Just looking at the group chat, Rose, I'm not sure that anybody's posted one in there, but they may have shot you one privately. Oh, here we go. Do you see that one?
How AI is being used in education. Hi, Mohammed. Yes, that's a very good question. I think at the moment it's being used in interesting ways. And most of the kind of AI systems that we're seeing in school at the moment are ones that fall into a certain number of categories. We have some very, very good systems out there that can individualize instruction to learners according to their needs. And it might be that they do this for a particular subject area, or it might be that they do this across the board. It's a platform that can individualize, and that means that we can help people of differing abilities and differing experiences. Then there are a lot of recommender systems that can help educators or learners or parents narrow down the sorts of resources that are available out there to try and find the ones that best meet their students or their own needs. And then there are the ways in which AI is being used in ways that perhaps are less obvious. So think about voice activated interfaces, for example. That's AI, and that can be really useful in education for helping people who find the keyboard difficult in terms of an interface. And I think as we move through the way AI is being used, we'll see more of these ways of blending different technologies together. So systems that use technologies like augmented reality, but combine it with artificial intelligence. And we're already seeing quite a few sensing systems out there. For example, one of the businesses that came through our Educate program is Oya Labs, and they have a sensing device that sits in a very young child's room and tracks the kind of verbal interactions that happen with that infant, between parents and infant, and offers the parents advice. So there's a range of different ways that AI is currently being used in education. But the real power of AI is much more than those individual applications. The real power of AI is in the data and the analysis of that data particularly if we use what we understand from the learning sciences that have helped us to understand more about how people learn, to inform the way we design the algorithms to process all of that data, so that we can start using that data and using the AI to understand more about how people are learning and therefore how best to support them. And I think one of the things that's often overlooked when we think about artificial intelligence is that we think and are impressed, quite rightly so, by the amazing developments in AI technology over the last couple of decades. But sometimes what we forget is there's been amazing developments in the learning sciences that have shown us much that we didn't know before about how the human brain learns and how we as individuals learn. So I hope that's helpful. I'm going to move on to the next section, and I will try and pick up some of these questions a little later on as well, but I want to make sure that we don't run further behind. So I'm going to share my screen again, I hope. Oops. There we go. And hopefully we can get going again on the presentation. Whoops.
It's sharing it successfully.
Thank you, Roland. There we go. Okay. So we've thought about human intelligence and artificial intelligence. But what am I on about when I talk about AI readiness? Well, AI readiness, as I've said, is about getting yourself ready to understand how you as an educator, or you as a tech developer, or you as a business can actually leverage AI to meet your needs. And we've developed a 7-step process to get you AI ready. And as I said, this is just an introductory webinar, and over the next few weeks, we'll be going into detail about these different steps for people who are interested in understanding a bit more. So there are 7 key steps that can get you, your organization, whatever kind of organization you are somehow involved in education and technology, to leverage the transformational power of AI. So we call it the ethical AI readiness, because obviously that's an acronym for the initial letters of the steps, but it's also a reminder that we must be careful that whatever we do with our AI, we do it ethically. I founded with Priya Lakhani and Anthony Selden the Institute for Ethical AI and Intelligence because we believe passionately that there are huge benefits to AI, but that we must make sure that those benefits are driven through and that we don't run unacceptable risks as we drive through those benefits. So we're all about trying to make sure that what happens with AI in education is ethical. So the first step is educate, enthuse, excite. And this is about building within your community an AI mindset. And I'll talk through these different steps in a minute. The second one, the T and the H, this is about tailoring and honing. What's the particular challenge that you want to focus on? So you think perhaps you're an educational leader and you think, there's this thing called AI. I think perhaps we need to be looking at what we should be doing here. Where do you focus that? What do you do? What's the particular challenge that you are facing where AI could be particularly helpful? Then there's the I, the identify. And this is about identifying wisely the data that you already have that's relevant to that particular challenge. And it's about collating that data, bringing that data together. I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. And when you've done that, you should also be able to identify any new data that would help you address the challenge, help you understand a bit more about that challenge. And you need to think about how you're going to collect that data. Now, there is an important thing to say about data, and that is when we're going to use data for AI, particularly machine learning AI, there's quite a lot of work to do in preparing that data to be used by the AI system. And we'll talk more about that in the weeks to come. Then there's the A, which is about applying AI techniques to the relevant data that you brought together. So you've got your data, you've collated your data. Hopefully it's data that's multimodal, that it's about, maybe it's log data from how people have been interacting with the system, but maybe they're not interacting with the system yet. So maybe it's questionnaire data, or maybe you have some video data or some audio data. It could be a whole different set of data that's relevant to the challenge that you're addressing. And then when you've collated it and you've cleaned it and you've prepared it, it's about how do we use the various different AI techniques that are out there to help us understand this data more. And again, that's where we'll be looking into the detail of this to a greater extent as we move through the weeks of this webinar course. And indeed, it's where ourselves as an organization can help people to know how to clean the data, to know how to apply the right techniques to the data that you have, and indeed to help you decide what data you need to collect. And then there's the learn, the L. This is about understanding what the data is telling you about that challenge that you're trying to address. And then we iterate. If we feel we've done enough, that we've really started to understand how that challenge that we've identified might be addressed through artificial intelligence, we can move on to the next step. But if we're not quite there yet, then we go back to step one. So let's just go through those steps in a little more detail. And I will also explain how you know when you've got to the point where you don't need to iterate anymore. So once you're AI ready, you should be able to identify what challenge or activity AI could be used for to really enhance the organization. And this includes identifying organization and possibly your customers as well, if you're a business. And once you've done that, you should also be able to identify where you want the AI to be applied. That's important. Who are the people who are going to experience this AI? Where are they going to be located? And then why? Why are you using AI for this particular challenge? And this is what I call the imperative of any AI you intend to apply. And I think this is the most important thing that we do when we start looking at AI, particularly machine learning. It's the imperative, the reason why AI is being applied to this particular challenge. So, for example, we could use the same data and the same algorithm for different purposes, but it's the imperative that tells us what the reason that we're using this AI is. So perhaps we're designing a recommender system. Perhaps we're designing a recommender system to help teachers be able to identify particularly suitable resources that they might harvest from the internet for a particular group of learners with a particular need, for example. We can collect lots of data about those resources, and we can label that data, and we can process that data, and we can identify those resources that we feel are the most appropriate. But how are we making those identification? How are we deciding that these resources are appropriate for these learners? Are we going to decide that these are the resources that will really help them to achieve of their best? Or are we setting the imperative of our AI to find the resources that will just keep them going along at the same level? Well, I know which one I'd prefer, but the same data and the same type of algorithm can be used for either of those results. So the imperative is really important. And who will be involved? Who will be involved as you use this AI, as you try and leverage the power of AI in your school, in your college, in your business? Who will be the staff that will be involved? Will there be learners involved? Maybe it'll be customers, maybe it'll be parents, but maybe there's broader stakeholders and partners that you want to bring together. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that at the end of this webinar. So, an example, because it's very hard to think about things in the abstract. It's much easier when we have an example to work through. So, educate, enthuse, excite about building within your community an AI mindset. Well, this might be about explaining the basics of AI, what AI can do, what AI can't do, and why it's going to transform education and educational technology. And to contextualize this within your particular organization, using language and case study examples that will be familiar to people from different parts of the organization. And this is everyone, not just the people who work in the IT department or who give IT support, it's everyone. And once one of the organizations that we've been working with actually organized a conference for all of the staff, at which point the senior managers presented the basics of AI, and we helped them along with this. And they presented why AI was going to be important for their business, for their training organization. And then we come to tailor and hone, this business about finding the particular challenge you want to focus on. Perhaps you're a business that needs to recruit tutors, and you're unsure if the decisions that you're making are the best ones when you're recruiting those tutors. Another example, we helped a different organisation to reflect on the significant aspects of their recruiting process when they were trying to onboard tutors. And we used the analysis of audio and psychometric data that we collected during their recruitment process. And it was very much with the aim of demonstrating the potential approach of utilising AI in the service of human decision making, rather than using AI to fully automate the decision-making process itself. So it was very much about helping the humans who were making those decisions about potential tutors have much, much more information that could be garnered by the AI as people were being interviewed, to give the humans much more information to make better decisions. Then there's the identify. I talk about wisely identifying and collating data that you already have that can help you to understand that challenge. Well, following on from the previous slide, the data that we used, along with the audio and the psychometric data, was also video and audio recordings of past recruitment interviews and the discussions that were held by the interview team afterwards about candidates. And we analysed all that to try and actually show the recruiters that perhaps they were not making decisions in quite the evidence-informed way that they thought they were. So we were able to show them things that they hadn't seen before about this challenge that helped them make better decisions in the future. Collect. Well, it's highly unlikely that you'll have the data ready for that challenge that you're thinking might be the place where you're going to apply AI. So it's likely that you'll need to collect new data. And when you identified that challenge, you really want to focus on exactly what would help you understand that challenge more, because you really need to understand the challenge to know where AI can help best with tackling that challenge. So, for example, again, a company that we've worked with wanted to better understand their trainees as they transitioned into work from the training process. And they had a lot of data already about trainee performance, and they had the original recruitment data. But we helped by adding to this a whole set of personality and motivational trait questionnaires that pulled together data from the sources that they already had and helped us to unpack much more of what was happening with those trainees and to give much better explanations about how they were or were not successfully transitioning into work. And then there's apply. And this is where, in the most part, people will need help. There are a whole range of different AI techniques that can be applied to this data. And really, the decisions about which techniques are ones that need to be made by people who have an expertise in data science and AI. But really, machine learning is very much about recognizing patterns in data and making predictions based upon those patterns. And so this is where AI is really helpful. For us to process all this masses of data would be extremely difficult, time consuming, and we'd probably make a lot of mistakes. But AI is really good at processing large amounts of data. And this means that we can analyze many different data sets collected from different sources, such as voice, text, physical movement, log data. And we can use AI to create coherent models from that data that pull different information sources together and tell us things we did not know. And then there's finally learn. And this is really important. So we've got our data together, we've collected new data, we've used AI technique, we've applied the techniques. What can we learn from this that will help us to understand that challenge more and think about how AI can help to solve that challenge? So, for example, you want to help students in your school become more self-reflective, perhaps. Multiple wisely selected data sources have been analysed using AI to illustrate the profile of students and in what circumstances students do or don't develop all those all-important self-reflective skills and expertise. This information can then contribute to your thinking about course, curriculum design, teacher training, or even designing a technology to support that self-reflective process. And then iterate. As I said, if you haven't got to a point where you feel you know enough to be able to say, yes, this is where and how we want to use AI, then you iterate again. You go through that same process again. And really importantly, you re-engage with those people that you started engaging with at the outset to make sure that they still understand where your organization is going in its thinking about AI. And so I'm going to stop again in case there are some questions that people would like to ask. Oh, it looks like there's quite a lot of questions in there. Roland, is there any that you would pick out as being ones that I might miss?
Well, I think the first one came just after Mohammed. It's from Kate Nicholson, and she's just saying, when you looked into intelligence, did you take into consideration the Dunning-Kruger effect? Is it not more the case of ignorance rather than low intelligence? A computer with limited information would make assumptions and work on the information it has, which might be similar to the effect.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. And I think we have to be very careful about recognizing ignorance. You're right. It's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? We tend to think about low intelligence. I don't really like thinking about intelligence in that way, because I believe, putting aside specific learning difficulties and specific learning needs that may not be easily addressed, I think as humans, many of us have qualities of intelligence that we just don't recognize at the moment. I think a lot of people go through the education system, and actually much of what they contribute in terms of intelligence to society is not something that's been recognized in the education system. So I kind of slightly quibble over the word low intelligence, but I think I get what you're saying. And I think it's really important that when we use AI, we don't use limited information other than limited in a way that has been carefully thought through. Because you're absolutely right. It would be very easy for an AI system working on a very limited data set to make very poor decisions, and certainly to make decisions that might suggest that something was likely to happen when in fact it wasn't. Or perhaps more worryingly, that a particular individual learner wasn't achieving something well when perhaps they were. So I think the whole business of getting AI ready is actually very much relevant to your question, because it's very much about trying to work out what is the information, what is the data that you really need to have in order to understand that challenge before you start thinking about, well, what's the AI we're going to design? And I think this approach can also help us to tackle another problem that I think is relevant to your question, which is one around bias in data sets. There are so many stories about bias in data that's used by AI systems. And I often feel that much of that could be avoided if we spent much more time understanding the problem that we're using the AI to address, and thinking about the data that we already have and the data that we need to collect in order to really understand that problem. And that can help reduce those risks of bias. Now, looking down, are there any other questions, Roland, you think I should focus on? I'm going to do one more now, and then I'm going to go back.
Sure. I think this one from Vamsi, she's just asking about the, sorry, I don't know, yeah, it could be he or she, apologies for that. So they're just asking about the AI in education. What level of improvement do you think has been achieved through personalized learning pathways, which have been derived or brought about from machine learning techniques on learning outcomes and stuff?
Such a good question, such a good question. And it's one of those, sorry, my answer is going to be slightly frustrating, but I'm very happy to send you some information. We can make that available. In fact, what we'll do, Roland, is we'll make these references available from the website so that people can access them. Well-designed, personalized systems have very good results, but that's the key phrase, well-designed. So there are a host of studies, academic studies, and we'll make sure we put those references up for you, that demonstrate that well-designed systems of this sort can be as effective as a human teacher, but only a human teacher teaching a whole group of students. So you've got the AI teaching one-to-one. It can only do as well as the teacher teaching a group, but that's quite good. it can be helpful. You know, if you're a busy teacher, you might have one group of students using one of these systems where you're working with another, and you know that they will be learning. They're likely to be learning. But of course, we can't as yet, and I personally don't believe we'll ever be able to perform using AI as well as a one-to-one human teacher with a human learner. Unfortunately, very few learners get that experience. So I think these systems have a very valuable role to play, because they can at least give some individualization and personalization. But they do need to be well designed. And what do I mean by well designed? Well, they need to be designed using tested principles about the way that you do adapt to individual learner needs. So we need to know that they've been based in a way that's informed by the learning sciences, by what we know about how people learn. And then, yet they can be effective. But as I say, the caveat is they need to be well designed. When they are, they can be really useful. Great question, thank you. I'm going to move on to the last section so that we get through it all, and also so that there's time for more questions if people want to ask. And Roland, remind me, we must put those references on the website, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Right, I'll start sharing again. Whoops.
That's working.
Right, so AI readiness really is for everyone. Now we're focusing on educators and on education and on educational technology businesses, training business, teaching business, schools, colleges, universities, because we care about education. But actually AI readiness is for everyone. Our focus is on education. So everybody can be AI ready if we go through these stages, and we can help you with this. We can help you through these webinars and even beyond, should you so wish. Because once you are AI ready, just to recap, you should be able to identify challenge or activity that AI could be used to power up your learning, your students' learning, your staff, your business. It's all about AI augmenting us as humans and using AI to help us understand the challenges well enough that we can pinpoint where we're going to use that AI. So it's then where you want the AI to be applied. Why are you using it? That really important imperative. Why is AI going to help here? Why do you need it? What's the problem that it's going to solve for you? Why is it AI that's going to help with this? And who will be involved? And we'll come on to more detail about who later, but it's important to think broadly. So let's have some examples of these, as we had examples of the steps. So I say, once you're AI ready, you should be able to identify the challenge or the activity. And I've also stressed the importance of being able to know what human intelligence you need to develop within your organization in order for you to be able to use that AI to tackle that challenge effectively. So for example, perhaps the data that you collected during those 7 steps has demonstrated that a particular profile of student will need more support with a course that has an essay as part of the assessment. And you might therefore identify that the provision of some kind of writing mentor for such students would be a good challenge for AI and human intelligence to work together. Some sort of expert mentoring where the human and the AI would both work together to help the student. When the human's present, they can provide advice. When the human's not present, the AI mentor can provide advice and can make sure that the human is aware of what's happened when they weren't present, helping that learner. Once you're AI ready, you should be able to identify where you want to apply the AI. So it could be that the 7-step process has shown you that in your organization, you're recruiting some staff who are not likely to be effective without significant amounts of professional development. And this knowledge allows you to decide whether or not to invest in an AI-enhanced support service for staff that's particularly suitable for the type of staff identified through the data analysis that need that continuing professional development, and you can provide that. Or you might decide that it's about the recruitment stage and that you need to change the type of staff you appoint. Maybe you're not actually seeking the right sort of people to come into that role. But again, AI can help. So here's a decision. You've got your data, you've collected your data. You could go one way or you could go the other way, and you need to know enough to know which way you're going to pitch. And if you're AI ready, then you'll know why. That important imperative that I talk about all the time. The most important aspect of any machine learning algorithm is the imperative for its design. You know, the unique contribution that machine learning or that other form of AI is going to provide for you, for your school, for your organization. And the same data can be used to achieve very different outcomes, depending on the imperative of the algorithms used to process it. So for example, we know that facial data, facial expressions, combined with spoken audio data is a very good data set for helping us to understand the emotional state of the individual. Now that could be really useful to a teacher to provide some targeted support so that when they're told that students are looking disappointed with their performance, that's when we design the system and we design the human intervention to really come in with some helpful targeted support. But that same data and that same algorithm could also be used to provide punitive feedback when they look disappointed. Now, I would certainly not want that to be the case, but my point is the data and the algorithm are essentially the same, but the imperative is different. And that's why it's really important to understand the imperative of the AI. And then that fourth point about how you know when you're AI ready. You need to know who will be involved. And as I stress time and time again, the who in this instance is really not just people who are already known to be technical or techies or IT departments or people who are already keen at looking at technology and AI. It may be many other people in the school, in the business that you need to involve. It could be learners, parents, broader stakeholders and partners. This is about identifying the people in your organization and beyond who you want to be working with the AI and working to provide the resources that the AI needs, such as data, to ensure these people are involved right from the beginning. So something differently, they understand why, and they're not thinking, why are we suddenly doing this? We've never done this before. How is this going to benefit the learners, the teachers, the business? And as I say, it's also the point at which you can start looking for other organizations and businesses to work with you in partnership. And this is very much what we've been building as a methodology over the period of the Educate project that ran from 2017 to the end of 2019 at UCL. And this was a project that was funded from European Regional Development Funding, and it was all based on the notion of the Golden Triangle. And the Golden Triangle is indeed a triangle, and the points of the triangle are the three communities that need to be brought together. Now, the Educate program was focused on educational technology more generally, not just AI, but actually this approach is particularly important when it comes to AI, and I'll explain that. So the 3 points of the triangle that need to be connected are the people who use technology, in schools, in colleges, in homes who use technology, and in this instance, using AI technology to support learning, to support teaching, to support training. Then we need to bring them together with the people who are building those systems, people who are developing the AI systems for use in education and training. And the way we bring them together is through the third point, the researchers, people like the team I showed you at the start of this presentation, people like us who understand both those communities and can bring those communities together. And we do it around data and evidence, because data and evidence are really important for helping us to understand whether something's working or not. Is a technology we're using in education being effective? It's really important also for AI. And actually, if we use this Golden Triangle approach, we can really start to bring these communities together to produce and to apply much better AI for educational and training use. And the reason the triangle is golden is because it's all about that golden evidence and data. And so in the circle figure, you can see 3 actions. The first one is about using AI in education. The second is about changing education because we have AI. And the third is about educating people about AI. Now, the focus for today is very much in that third action, helping people understand AI. And we need to do that in order to help them use AI more effectively, and also in order for them to think about how we might need to change education because we have AI. And the real key to bringing about that virtuous cycle, because those actions are not mutually exclusive, is through this triangle at the heart. Because if we can help educators and trainers to understand much more about artificial intelligence. Most educators don't understand AI. Why on earth would they understand AI? But if we can help them to understand more by helping them to work with the people who are developing the AI systems for use in education, that's hugely beneficial for those educators as a community. Now, most people building AI systems for use in AI don't really understand a great deal about teaching and learning. So if we can get them working together with the teachers, the educators, the learners, then we can help them understand much more about what it's like to be teaching and learning. And that's where we come in as researchers, providing the glue, if you like, to help those communities work together. Because I believe that these cross-stakeholder partnerships will be the best way to build the right AI for use in education across the sectors. And indeed, helping these communities is not about the tech developer saying to the teacher, what do you want? It's helping that teacher understand what the AI company is trying to achieve. And it's about the AI company being helped to understand what it's like for the teacher, what it's like for the learner, what are the big challenges they face, so that we can design the AI much better together. And so that's the end of the material I'm going to deliver today, and we have indeed got some time left for questions. But before I go on to the questions, I just want to tell you what's happening next. There will be a series of webinars. Now, we're splitting them into two different tracks, because today was an introductory webinar, but we feel that the needs of people running technology or education businesses are different to the needs of schools, colleges, universities, educators. So we're going to run two parallel tracks of webinars to try and make sure that the examples we pick are much more suitable to those two different sorts of audiences. And they'll take place in the way that this one has taken place, and we'll take you step by step through the ethical AI readiness framework. And we can also tell you more about the way that we as a group can provide a service to help you to make this happen in your organization, should you be so interested. And indeed, if you want to find out more about any of this, there's that very easy to remember email at the end, help@Educate Ventures. And I realize it's so easy to remember that I forgot to put the end on. It's help@educateventures.com. So I hope that you'll be able to find that, and apologies for that. So any more questions, do please
so Rose,
ask away. I'll do my best. Roland,
yeah, so
where am I going? What's the best questions?
Kate is asking about the ethical framework in the identify stage. So she's asking, do you discuss the import and the weighting of the data? For example, weighting assessment scores to be more important than comparative scores, or class level allocation. And she's also asked, when we identify and collect, do we outline rubrics, checklists, or guidelines to try to quantify the qualitative data?
Such a good question. Obviously, somebody who knows a lot about data and a lot about analysis. That's interesting, isn't it? Obviously, it depends on the challenge that you're facing. You certainly need to make sure that you collect representative data. But I think you also need to be careful not to make too many decisions too early, because you do want to use as much data as possible to see what you can find out using these AI techniques. Now, obviously, it has to be representative and it has to be balanced. So I think you make a very wise point in your question about making sure that you don't start off with an unbalanced set of data, or a data that's going to very much focus on aspects of the challenge that aren't the aspects that are important to you. So when I said about identifying wisely, that was really what I was trying to get at. And it is a fine balance. And actually, it's a really good question that we'll try and deal with more when we go through this step in the further webinars, to look at some examples of where, it's perfectly clear that the data that you're using at that step around the identify and the collect, the I and the C, is not balanced enough for you to be able to really get something useful from the AI, and where you need to stop in being too prescriptive about the data, because otherwise you're kind of trying to second guess what the AI is going to tell you. So it's a great question, and we'll certainly go into more detail about that when we come to the webinar that looks at that particular step in the framework. Roland, any more? Because I haven't been able to watch the questions as they come up, so Roland's been helping me to make sure that I pick out ones that would perhaps be useful to the most people.
Two people have asked about GDPR, Rose, and they're just interested, essentially, what with data protection restraints, how deeply can we probe the data that has built an AI system, and you know, do we find that it's a consistent barrier?
It's a very important barrier. I think we need the GDPR regulation. So it's actually an opportunity, and we've certainly found this to be the case when we've been working with organizations. As you start the data identification and collection process, you immediately start to ask questions about GDPR. So right from the start, you're making sure that you're tackling that issue. And then at every step along the way, we need to be reminding ourselves about that. And GDPR is a start, but there's a whole lot of other ethical issues that need to be addressed throughout this process. And we'll have a webinar exclusively devoted to the ethical issues that we need to take account of as we go through this process. And I think one of the things that's important about the ethics piece here is to recognize that every organization who are using AI needs to have its own process that it can be very transparent about, not the detail of what you're looking, but the process that you use to make sure that you are compliant to the highest standards when it comes to being ethical. And that's certainly what the Institute for Ethical AI and Ed are developing. We're trying to develop tools to help people be sure about how to provide the right kind of processes, the right policies, the right steps along the way for their organization. I've got 1 minute left, Roland. Is there a quickie I can answer?
There might be a quick one, yeah. Do we envisage AI to significantly accelerate education performance, and will a lack of adoption of AI cause schools to fall behind?
Oh, that's not a quick question, but I'll try and, I mean, it's such a good question. If we get it right, then sure, we will be able to help schools accelerate. But we have to be really careful that we don't end up narrowing down what it means to accelerate. I really worry that if we don't get the first steps right, we can help students perform better along a very narrow track, which is not that rich human intelligence I was talking about at the beginning. So we need to be very, very careful that we get that breadth. And absolutely, we need to make sure that we help as many schools, as many organizations to get the benefits of AI so that they're not left behind. That would be a terrible outcome. I've had this dystopian nightmare for a while now, where you have one category of learner that gets the lovely, well designed set of interactions, some of which use AI, some of which use human interaction. I must say at this point that my vision for the future is one that has far less screens than the one we've got now. This is not about screen time. This is very much about enhancing the human experience, the social interaction. And then there's another category of students that get something that's not anything like as satisfactory as that. So I think it's something we have to be very, very careful about. And again, it's very much in the mind of the Institute for Ethical AI and Ed. My time's up, and it's been great to have so many people joining this webinar. I do hope you'll come along the way and you'll sign up for the next ones. We'll be putting the information about them out soon, and we'd love to have your feedback. If there's anything you didn't understand, if there's anything you particularly like to know more about, please let us know, because we're we have the framework, we have the skeleton of the webinars to come, but we can still make some changes. So if there's things that you feel you'd like to know more about, we can build those in. But thanks for joining today, and it's been great to get this webinar series off the ground. So I'll say goodbye and have a great evening.
Thanks all.